welcome to a very special Armed Forces Day edition of American Warrior Radio, the place to be for news, notes, interviews, and current events for all issues military and veteran related. If you or someone you know has ever worn the uniform of the U.S. Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, or National Guard or Reserves, you've come to the right place. American Warrior Radio, right here on the Talk to Me station, AM 1300 WMEL, and online worldwide at 1300WMEL.com, sponsored by AVET Project. Folks, this program is all about supporting our troops and their families, both past and present. So please, get comfortable, grab a beverage and a pen and paper to jot down a note or two, because we're always efforting to bring you important information that you can use and share with others. With that said, let's roll down the runway and get this show off the ground. My name's Garen Cohn. You all know me. I'm an Air Force veteran, retired legal advocate for veterans, and founder of AVET Project, but you also know that I never fly through the airwaves alone.
Good morning. I'm Glenn McGuffey. I'm retired Air Force, and I'm the retired manager of the Brevard County Veteran Services team, where it was my honor to help our veterans and their eligible dependents apply for and obtain VA benefits earned by their service to our great country. I served in that capacity for 22 plus years, and again, it was my honor to do that. You know, Garen, we have an incredible show today. Not only is this Armed Forces Day, but we have a very special guest joining us today. Take it from there.
Indeed, Glenn. But before I introduce our guest, I want to take a second and remind our listeners here on the Space Coast especially that SCCLS, that stands for Space Coast Community Law School, which is free, what's the word?
Free
legal seminars, is rolling along, and the upcoming class on May 21st addresses planning and zoning issues, so please register at sccls.com. Without further delay, it is our distinct pleasure and a real treat to have your VA Undersecretary for Benefits, Allison Hickey, join us today on American Warrior Radio. Hello, Madam Secretary.
Good morning, but I would also ask you just to please call me Allison. There's too many syllables in that whole other title.
Consider it done. Thank you, ma'am. And really, we're just really honored to have you come on American Warrior Radio. Our listenership has been looking forward to this for some time now. It's been a buzz here throughout WMEL Radio and online, our Facebook. Gosh, even some friends of mine up in D.C. that work with the VA heard that you were going to be appearing on this Armed Forces Day special edition. So thank you so much, Allison, for joining us.
Yeah, and I won't have any trouble.
Garen and Glenn, both of you, for having me on the show today on this very special day and the opportunity to talk about what matters to our veterans, their family members, and their survivors.
You bet. Well, it's our distinct pleasure to have you here, Allison, and I can remember that name because that's my wife's name. So.
Easy for you, yes.
I thought we'd start off and ask you to provide us a high-side pass about yourself. We always like our guests to give a little bio info about themselves and tell the audience where you were born and raised and what prompted you to get into the Air Force.
So thanks for that question, Glenn. You know, I have a little bit of an unusual start, but not for a lot of those people who proudly call themselves military brats. I was actually born to military parents stationed abroad in Paris, France, which always makes it interesting when I'm filling out things like security clearances throughout my
I bet.
I imagine, which you've done a lot.
Absolutely. And then spent the next 18 years of my life moving every 18 months to a new location, a new post, now base, in support of my father, who was an Army officer, and my mother, who took great pride in being the spouse and family member of a military serving member.
And you do. You have a rich tradition of military service within your family. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, we just heard that you, as we term it military brat, and Glenn, you're familiar with that as well, you being one.
Yeah, I'm also one, so you're in good company, Allison.
But fill in a couple blanks about your dad.
It starts well before my particular life, my dad went to West Point and graduated in the 50s, and then went on to serve for more than 30 years himself. But I also have grandparents who've also served in World War I and World War II, and on my husband's side, his father served in World War II in the Pacific. Then I have, frankly, brother and sisters who have either served themselves or have been a family member of a career military individual. So military runs deep in our family. It's probably the largest part of my DNA. I'm married to a veteran of the Air Force who served a complete career in the military, active guard and reserve. And I am a mother of a son who is going to Army ROTC in college right now, and my other two children are both doing public service to the nation, either the state or the nation, in another capacity.
Outstanding. That's some real history there, folks.
Yeah, that's wonderful. When you were in high school, Allison, I understand you wanted to know why females were not allowed in the service academies, and maybe you could explain what ended up happening there.
Yeah, so I was, as an Army brat growing up, I grew a really deep passion for the military and what it does, and how they serve, and how the families sacrifice so much in that service to our country. And so I knew very early in my life that I wanted to sort of follow in the footsteps and serve in the military. And since my father's experience had been one of going to a military academy, I kind of thought, that's the best way for me to do that. But at the time, the service academies were not open to women. But there was a little buzz, out there on the streets. And so at my high school, there was a group of Air Force Academy cadets that came for what they call a grassroots program to talk to people or recruit people, get them interested in the academies. And I went and signed up and asked to go, and my career counselor at school basically said, well, but they're not open to women. And I explained to him why I wanted to go and how deep my passion was for doing it. And so even though it wasn't open, he said, I'm going to let you go. And so I was the only one
How big of him?
that probably ever attended any of those things up to that point. And I was also stationed, we were stationed at Fort Lewis at the time, and my dad knew of my interest, and he brought over a colleague of his who happened to be a woman general officer, and she came in and basically said, listen, don't, keep working hard, be prepared, be ready, because there are things that are happening right now, so just do everything as if you are applying. And so I did. And then happy one day to walk out the front door of my home in 1975, looking up at Mount Rainier and see the paper laying on the front stoop that said President Ford had signed Bill 94-106 in 1975 that set me up to go to the Air Force Academy with its first class of women.
Exactly,
Wonderful.
but there's a neat little story behind that, because you tell the story how you found out, how you actually got notified, what you were doing when you found out that you'd been accepted.
So I was by this time in another move, so it was on the opposite coast. It's in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and I was out running to be prepared.
Sure.
And my sister came running out the field to the parade field where we were out running and trying to do things to get physically fit, and told me, quick, you got to come home, you got to take the phone, because Representative James Howard is on the phone and they want to talk to you. And so I had to run home and get on the phone. And at the time I was applying not just to Air Force, I was also applying to West Point and several of the others. And it was the Air Force Academy that said, okay, listen, and Representative Howard said, okay, listen, we can offer you this appointment, but you have to agree to take it right now. So I've often said, that was the first part of my life where I remember that sometimes you just have to have a lot of courage and just, take the big leap of faith and jump in with all you got and go forward. And so that's what I did. And that's sort of what I've been doing since.
Exactly.
With everything you've got, being all in anything and anywhere you're serving, just to really try to affect a change.
Well, and you've been described as a woman of many firsts. You're a pioneer, quite honestly. And I love that story about how you were notified that you were accepted. Because for those, and I'm not sure we've mentioned it, Allison, but you are a retired brigadier general from the United States Air Force. Did we say that yet?
Not that I know of.
Okay, so let's frame it up in that way. But being among the first Air Force Academy class to include women, can you kind of describe some of the special challenges that were waiting for you once you did accept your appointment?
So there was, when I went to the academy in June of 1976, there were about 153 of us that went in that first class. As you can expect, change is hard no matter what you do and no matter where you go. And in this case, this was changing, years and years of tradition.
Oh, yes.
Where it was also changing, by the way, at West Point, Indianapolis on the very same day. We all started on the same day. There were things like they weren't quite ready for us with uniforms. They didn't quite know how to put all that together. So there was a lot of growing and learning through that whole process. I remember when I first showed up there that I had an opportunity to go and be sized for uniforms and the like, and they realized that they didn't have all the other things that women wear and need at the campus, on the academy grounds. So they literally had to take a group of women officers they brought in specifically to help us with our adjustment, send them downtown to the local stores, the JCPenney's, and have them buy us, the undergarments and all those other kinds of things that women wear that they hadn't had before. So there were some of those kind of interesting moments in time where you make adjustments, and then there were other times where, you kind of had to just, not everybody was happy you were there. I fondly say that there was about half of them that were not happy you were there, and the other half that were happy you were there, and I married the one that was indifferent about it all.
Good choice, I guess.
But there was just it was such an awesome experience to be able to be the first on the ground to do something like that, to pave a way for so many women that have come since. So we're coming up on our 35th graduation reunion here this fall. That means there have been 35 plus another 38 years of women who have now graduated from that academy since the first day we attended.
Right.
And who are doing such phenomenal things. For instance, General Janet Wolfenbarger is the Air Force's first woman four-star, just recently retired. She was in my class.
Wow.
Lieutenant General Susan Helms, who was the astronaut and flew the 5 different space shuttle missions and still holds the record for the longest spacewalk within that class.
And former
just go on and on.
Former commander of the 45th Space Wing down here on the Space Coast as well.
Absolutely.
General Helms. Yeah, so, and those were contemporaries of yours back in the day.
Absolutely. In fact, Sue and I were good friends at the academy, going through all those changes and growth opportunities and learning and making a difference. So it was exciting to see her do so well. And I remember when she was a cadet going through her astro classes and her talk about her desire to, be in space and do things in space. And so she achieved that great mission as well.
Well, since we're talking about the early days there, while you were at the academy, what was your interest? What did you major in? What were you looking to do with your career in the Air Force?
So my major was in behavioral science, though everyone who graduates from the Air Force Academy takes an awful lot of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics courses. So even if you had a history degree, you had a Bachelor of Science in history, which is unusual because you carried so many credits that were in those very valuable STEM fields. And it's one of the good things about an academy degree even today. So that's what I did. I also had thought about going and following in the footsteps of my father in the communications field, but had another interesting thing that happened, and that was there were only 25 of that first class that included women, and the women of the women who were physically qualified to fly airplanes, and I was one of those 25.
Woohoo!
And so in order to not go through the flying track, you had to actually go up to the academic department and sort of eliminate yourself from that. And so I went up there to do that with an intention on, following a different set of career paths, and I, voiced that out loud to my career counselor, who was a pilot, and I think every pilot within shouting distance of his voice came quickly to his desk to talk me out of doing that, which is probably one of the best things that ever happened.
That's fantastic.
So, they were telling me all the reasons. Look, you get all this great pay, you get to,
see the world.
Promotion opportunities, you do cool things, and finally, I wish I remembered this name of this particular officer who said this to me, but he said, let me just ask you this question. What's it going to hurt to try? And I looked at him and he made such good sense about, I didn't know what it was like to fly an airplane. I'd probably only flown on 2 in my entire life that I could recollect. I didn't know what it was like to take an airplane and do fun things with it through the sky. And so his logic made me pause and think and make a different decision, and I walked out of there staying in the pilot track. Just good advice to people to not just sort of, to just try something and see what it's like and see what you can do with it. And so that made the difference, I think, in one of my career paths that I have taken.
Exactly. Don't limit yourself to any possibility. At least try. If you fail, maybe there's a different route you want to take. But you stuck with it. And Glenn, you had a question.
Yeah, and as your Air Force career took off, using an Air Force phraseology, what platforms did you fly?
So I trained in the T-37s and the T-38s pilot training, and then I went on to fly the KC-135s at Grand Forks Air Force Base, North Dakota. So I was a SAC-trained warrior, as we used to call ourselves then.
The days of Mac, SAC, and TAC.
SAC massage.
And then I was selected for what we call an Astra assignment, which is a rather prestigious assignment at the Pentagon as a captain. And did that for a year, and then followed on with that to fly what was then the brand new KC-10s. So both sides of air refueling and both sides of the Red River, because I flew the KC-10s down at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana.
It's impressive. So how many, and you're a command pilot with the KC-10 extender?
I was a command pilot in the 135s. I flew as a co-pilot in the KC-10s, and then woke up one day in Zaragoza, Spain, and thought I had appendicitis, and the non-speaking English doctor said, "No, baby."
And another first.
So that's where that moment came back and spent a little more time active duty, and then figured out that the Lord had blessed me with a new role in life, beyond wife, now mother, and an officer and pilot and all the rest. And so I had to figure out how to put all those things together, and so I then took another pathway and ended up doing the Guard and Reserve, first part-time, and then back full-time, and then full circle back Title 10 at the Pentagon, and then in a weird way, there's only a few of us that have ever done it, back into the Air Force headroom as a general officer.
Outstanding. And folks, we're talking with Allison Hickey, retired one-star Brigadier General with the United States Air Force, now Undersecretary for Benefits for the entire VA. But I have to go back to your story about being in Spain and being told by the non-English speaking doctor, Bebe. They all actually had to modify the regulations to have a female that was pregnant piloting a KC-10 extender, yes?
Absolutely, and in fact, it was interesting that at Zaragoza, you really didn't have an operational base. It was, there was not housing areas anymore, and there weren't, positions. There happened to be, with a fighter squadron that had come down from Spangdahlem, a flight surgeon who literally the day before he left to go down there for that TDY had read a note that came across his desk that had said that they were getting a brand new pilot for, no pun on words, but for women to fly pregnant up to 6 months. And he had just seen that, so literally when I came back from, the sudden news, and went to talk to him, he said, well, interesting, let me see if I can get you a very quick waiver so you can fly and fly home, and then they can go do all the formal things when you get back. And so he did, and so I was granted on the spot the very first waiver to be able to fly pregnant. And I don't for a minute believe that I was the first woman to ever fly pregnant.
You're the first one to speak up about it.
To fly under this brand new waiver program. And funny as it was, there was a little base exchange there, and someone had found one of those then very popular baby on board signs. So they had bought one and stuck it in the boom pod for the folks we were refueling on the way home, just to have a little fun and do a little celebration with me. So that's an interesting one, and I tell folks that my oldest son is the first one that legally gets to claim time in vitro.
At 35,000 feet, no less. That's awesome. Again, folks, we're talking with Undersecretary for Benefits, Allison Hickey, and we'll be back in a minute. You will be able to join us for the second segment because we haven't even started. We just really appreciate you taking some time to familiarize Glenn and I and all of our listeners, and those of you that are viewing this on YouTube. We appreciate all the media, the social media exposure and all that. So you will hang on the line with us, Allison?
I absolutely will.
Outstanding. I just want to mention to everybody out there that later today from 6 to 9 p.m. it is the Armed Forces Day celebration at Cocoa Beach Country Club. We want you to come dressed in red, white, and blue. We're going to have military speakers. You're going to get to commiserate with your fellow vets. We're going to have some food, music, and cash bar silent auction. And Glenn, this is the exciting part. We're going to have a free screening of Injured Warriors Learning How to Surf. It's an awesome documentary.
And it's free.
That's right. Tonight, 6 to 9, we'll talk about kids on the water when we come back after we finish our awesome interview with Undersecretary for Benefits, Allison Hickey. So don't go anywhere. American Warrior Radio is going to be right back right after this.